Coogs House. Chris Pezman, Houston Cougar AD, officially said the thing. Buck the NFL.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, we see you, Tennessee. Thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. And if you want to join in the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comment section down below, wherever you found this podcast, what your favorite version of the Houston Cougar uniform is. That can be across any sport. I really like the clever writing on the sleeve on Houston Cougar women's volleyball uniforms. I like the basketball uniform iteration of a couple ago at this point, where the two stripes on the side that cross at the bottom. I could digress a lot, but tell us what you like. The baseball uniform that's you're actually the pinstripes. That's nice. Tell us what you like below. Talk a lot about uniforms and swag in this episode, but we also want to talk some at the end of the episode about the leaked submissions towards, I guess, reported submissions, what was sent in on Houston's behalf to EA Sports in the NCAA 25 football video game. But the biggest story of the day is going to take up the first two segments, is this look at the Houston Cougar uniform, because it is getting a splash of blue. And in the spirit of things, we are two here for a little bit. Now, I want to say that first I want to talk about what the article said, because Duarte did great reporting, some really detailed look at what is coming for Houston. And I want to make sure we express all of that. And thanks to Duarte for doing the reporting on that's hard work. And then the second segment about what that means for Houston moving forward. On Wednesday morning, the Duarte article dropped from spring Big 12 meetings. Sounded like Duarte got a chance to talk to Pezman in what it looks like in the reporting to be more of a one-on-one kind of situation. And Pezman did a handful of things. Athletic director Chris Pezman to Joe Duarte mentioned that there was a cease and desist letter from the NFL to the University of Houston to stop using the Love Ya Coug branding and imagery and so on. And frankly, it sounds like that was all very real. And the timeline here is that Houston wore the uniform, their Love Ya Coug uniform, which looked similar to the Houston Oilers uniform, definitely pulled some ideas off of that. And the UTSA football game to open up the exciting 2023 season, first season of the Big 12, right? First home game was the only time they wore it. They did not sell any gear or anything with it. October 13th, so a little over a month later, the NFL reached out and said that the Cougs were attempting to, quote, get a free ride on the popularity of the NFL, which is a misunderstanding we'll get to in a second. But the initial response from Houston was that they weren't going to use the uniforms again, weren't going to make any merch on it. It was a one-time thing, would reach out. Things have changed. And now, according to Pezman, things have changed and Houston is reaching back out. Now, the cease and desist letter was very, very significant and serious. But I think it's interesting to say that Pezman and the group continue to look at what this uniform means to Houston. And as he said to Duarte, quote, "We literally have a story. We can show that the city uses it. This isn't a reach. This is a layup. We've got a very defensible position," right, in regards to the football uniform specifically. And they're pulling together a response, and then they're going to give the NFL a couple of weeks to respond to that response. What's interesting to me here is that Houston's using the city of Houston's iconic imagery, the old school light blue cop cars, the city flag, right, is light blue. It's a city that brings out Houston culture in a way that is not just the Oilers. Again, I said this back when the lawsuit was issued. If the Oilers were about representing the Oilers and not the city of Houston, their colors would have been like steel and black, right? Or brown, like something more oilish, right? An oil rig. The colors for the Oilers were always about Houston. That's why they wore them, right? And that's where this is coming from too. He said they're going to point out in their case or in their thing they're sending back, there were discrepancies and differences in the uniforms. For one, Houston used all University of Houston logos and fonts, right? The script Houston they used on the chest of the jersey and the side of the helmet, as opposed to Oiler logos, is a script they use on a lot of uh, uniforms and memorabilia and merchandise, right? It's the same font as the Cougars is on the black version of Houston's uniform, just says Houston, right? The blue is apparently a slightly different pigment of blue than the original Oiler powder, right? That's on purpose. So its way is not direct copyright infringement. The other thing about it is that the red Houston uses is just Houston Cougar red. It's not Oiler red or anything like that Tennessee and Miss Adams could get upset about. I think that the other thing that's interesting here is that the real thing that it sounds like could actually be any complaint with any legitimacy from the NFL is the striping on the sleeve, pants, and down the middle of the helmet is all located and eerily similar to what the Oilers did. However, as Pezman pointed out to Duarte, and as people pointed out online and on Reddits and things like that since uniforms were rolled out, SMU, Ole Miss, a lot of colleges use the exact same and the exact same striping in the exact same places, and it hasn't amounted to much of anything. That this is amounting to something legal is putting a real focus on Houston, which has done an intentional job of diverting it from other places. And again, the color scheme itself, Duarte is tying to the city itself. One quote from the article, if we're going to continue to praise Duarte's reporting on this, that I thought was particularly interesting was from Chris Pezman when talking about the reception of the uniforms across the city of Houston, right? Pezman told Duarte, quote, "I knew it would be good. I didn't know it would be what it was. We found a nerve and we've got to mine that vein. It's real. What's cool about it, it's not about us. It's about the city. That's what we have to continue to do." Now, I agree with all of that from Pezman. This is about the city feeling represented in a way. The color scheme ties to the city, right? And frankly, as the University of Houston, right? It's not the University of Texas at Houston. It's not the University of, Southeast Texas at Houston or what. It is the University of Houston. It represents the city, right? In the same way that like NYU is New York, Miami is the city of Miami, right? Pittsburgh is Pitt is Pittsburgh, right? Et cetera, et cetera. It represents the city in that way. And I know that all those teams I mentioned don't necessarily use professional team in their areas color schemes for sporting events, but to be fair, they do tie to colors that tie to their respective cities. I mean, Pitt wears a very distinct yellow, right? Miami's orange and green ties to the gardens there, right? That the school is located in. Those kinds of things are on purpose. Finding a color scheme that ties to the city is something Houston should continue to look into doing. This is also, as Pezman pointed out, just an alternate look they're going to do across all sports. This is no longer just a football thing, right? And so the idea that they're copying the Oilers somehow, when truthfully they're incorporating into each sport, actually builds Houston's case more, because there is no Houston Oilers themed baseball team to go with. There's no Houston Oilers themed track singlet to work out in this. I mean, these things are all, they're going to have an alternate look, right? That they'll wear every now and then, very rarely, but certain programs might wear them more than others across sports. They're still going to wear red and white the absolute most. They're still going to be red and white on the uniforms throughout the whole process. The idea here is just that it adds a little bit of a flavor that is tied to the city of Houston. And I think good comes from this. I want to talk about that some in a second, but we're talking about court cases and winning sides and losing sides. And that brings out my competitive side. And we've talked a lot about this because you've heard me talk about being a competitive person that likes to win, and that Monopoly Go is the perfect game to do that. You're probably tired of me talking about that, but I got to remind you that with Monopoly Go, you can also team up with your friends, for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much more to get with that great teamwork, much like the Houston Cougar teams we're talking about wearing these great uniforms. Unique stickers you can win that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. You can get cool new playing pieces to travel on the various boards you're playing on with. Hilarious emojis for when you're doing that trash talk back and forth. You can gather up for, put them in your vaults there. Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's even new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, so I mentioned that the key here is they're doing uniforms across all sports, an alternate look, just kind of the same way that like the volleyball team wears the gray, or we've seen like the football team wear black here and there. We've seen different colors incorporated, some grays and some charcoals and things like that across different sports. The Houston basketball team has a bunch of uniforms. You factor in like what they wear, what the logo, what the writing is across the chest times the colors and all those kinds of things, right? What they're rolling out here is adding a color to the brand, right? They're not adding a color to the logo or anything like that, but they are adding "Love You, Coug, Love You, Houston." Houston blue is what Pezman called the color in his conversation with Duarte. They're adding that into the fold here, and I think it's going to be a really cool way to tie in all the programs to the city, right? We've seen like the University of Houston baseball hats and softball hats that have the state of Texas within the interlocked UH, right? It's kind of the same idea just across all sports. And I think, so honestly, you could do a really cool baseball or softball uniform with pinstripes that are very faintly light blue, but then red and white writing, right? Not to mention that a blue uniform wouldn't be cool, but I think there's ways to make it subtle too. I think a track singlet would look great, right? With the red and white symbols all over it. Volleyball already has the cool uniforms I mentioned at the top, but adding a simple, whether it's blue writing on a white uniform or whatever, I mean, there's ways to add it into that adds more flair to what they're doing as well. Football, I hope, will continue to be this iconic look they rocked last fall, and frankly, starting better seasons with it, right? Last fall was fun because it was the Big 12, but not the season we want to be tied to this memory of these beautiful uniforms. We want to continue to have these beautiful uniforms and merch tied to just more successful football seasons. And so hopefully they kind of continue to harken back to that one. I'm making a long roundabout way because I think the real potential here is actually in marketing the basketball team. I don't know how much you all pay attention to high school basketball. As I mentioned at the top of the show every day, I am a Houston-born teacher and coach. I coach high school basketball, watch a lot of AAU basketball because my kids go play it that I coach in the spring and summertime. Uniforms matter to high school kids. Full stop. They might not matter to you. They might not matter to the people you graduated with. They matter to high school kids. They just do. And having options in basketball is for some reason very important. I mentioned in the last segment, Houston men's basketball has red, white, and black. And then within each one of those, they have red that says Houston, red that says Cougars, white that says Houston, white that says Cougars, black that says Houston, black that says Cougars, right? They have a bunch of different options. They also have an old school jersey, right? That says it's the Phi Slamma Jamma style of uniform. I think continuing to add options here continues to give you that bump up, especially with the Jordan gear, the Jordan brand being tied to the University of Houston has that swag element you're already trying to pitch kids on anyway, and adds a layer to what makes Houston a desirable place to be. I think that there's ties here with Jumpman, though, because Jordan as a brand ties themselves very closely to what they would call, because of where Michael went to school, Carolina blue, right? They enjoy making the sneakers, the warm-ups, the undergear, the whatever, all that tie to that. Even if you only have, the font on a white jersey that is that, and that's your tie to it, suddenly you get all these other additional things that you can bring in from the Jordan brand with it. I also think it's worth pointing out that having merchandise that sells well, and this stuff will sell well, we'll get to that in a second, will help bolster your deal with Jordan brand as things go forward. You could even become one of those schools that has a sponsored part of your football team, as we see across the country, some of the more premier, big-time programs do. And I think there's a really cool concept out there to do, and I thought about spitballing this out on Twitter, but I'm still working out what it would look like in my head. But basically think like the way Kansas State wears that like lavender, powder purple that otherwise has all the dark purple writing on it, right? There's a cool way to do the Houston uniform where the light blue is so faint it could really be worn as a home white uniform. And then the writing is the red and it outlines white, or maybe pull in some of the black or whatever, right? I think there's some way to work that all together that it doesn't take a person super creative to do, maybe a little more creative than I am, but it doesn't take someone super creative to incorporate a really faint light blue that kind of has the same effect of those beautiful lavender uniforms they're using up Kansas or at Kansas State. And we've seen how well those things do at a national marketing level, right? I mean, those things, all the gear they can put lavender on sells like hotcakes, right? Now, Pezman did make a comment about the marketing in the Big 12 to Duarte. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the whole thing word for word, but he mentioned that this helps Houston with the move into the Big 12 and becoming the city's team. Houston is 2.3 million people in the city limits. If you extend out to greater Houston, gets up to 7.3 million really, really fast, right? There are what feel like in that 7.3 million people, infinite college sports fans that don't have the direct tie to the big programs. Yes, that you see a lot of your t-shirt fans that wear orange shirts or dark purplish colored shirts, maroon, I guess is what they call it, right? Sure, those things happen. You even see, wearing shirts with the U on it or whatever, because t-shirt fans can be t-shirt fans. But what Pezman mentioned that I think is important here, and what this goes that helps the university in marketing, merchandising, bringing in dollars, bringing in eyeballs, etc., is that this exciting opportunity gives you a chance to win over those t-shirt fans by saying, hey, this is about the city. This is about all of us. This is about representing a beautiful city and culture that has this great university in it, right? There's a lot to Houston to love, a lot of things to love about Houston. The music scene, the art scene, the food scene, the diverse set of cultures all intertwined across the city, like all those different things, right? Having a way to brand yourself that ties you to that more than just the red and white interlocking UH, even more than that, is something I think worth investigating, because then you get those people to start coming to games. You get those people to get tickets. You get those people to get invested and involved. And the thing just continues to grow and grow and grow. The big programs that Houston is aiming and aspiring to grow into, and that frankly, the basketball program is knocking on the door into getting into, have t-shirt fans all over America. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I feel like you saw UNC hats everywhere, and everyone was either a North Carolina person or a Duke person. Now, those things have kind of changed, but why do we see Michigan sweatshirts all over the place, right? I think the idea here is that, like, you can have a brand, a thing that sells, that puts your name, puts who you are in a lot of places. And they feel like, and I think they're right about, putting in this Houston blue set of merchandise, even if the football team wears it one game a year, the basketball team wears it 2 or 3 home games a year, baseball wears it for the Sunday game on 2 different series, like whatever. These few moments you wear it means you can sell the merch, means you can attract the fan base, means you can grow the program. Those are all good things. And I have to point out that makes it worth doing. Now, talk about the different places that you could watch the Houston Cougars wear these uniforms. If you're looking for tickets to go do those things, I got to tell you where to do that and where to get those tickets. And that is with our buddies over at GameTime, the best place to buy tickets to all of your favorite events. It's not just sports, it's comedy, theater, concerts, anything you've got going on around Houston or wherever you're from, you can find tickets to it at GameTime, the best place to find the cheapest prices on tickets guaranteed. Now, they got all kinds of priority, like last-minute deals, flash deals that can get you great pricing right before the game starts, so you can get the better prices actually closer to the time things tip off, right? They have zone deals. You pick a section of the venue and roughly what series of rows. They find the seat for you. They do the hard work. You get an average of about 18% savings. All in pricing, no hidden fees. You'll see it as soon as you click on it. What I really appreciate is that whenever you hit on seats, right, they show you what it looks like from that vantage point and that section and row in that venue for that type of event. I think it's really, really important to get a seat where you can see what you're going to look like, what you're going to be looking at, I should say. You can download the GameTime app today and take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, last but not least, I did say I want to talk some about the NCAA Football 25 leagues. I didn't mean to make this just the last segment. As we get closer and closer to this game releasing and people playing it and so on, I'm sure we'll do a lot more with it. But if you haven't heard, EA Sports is bringing back the iconic college football video game. Now that NIL is a legal system, kids are getting small, but they're getting paychecks to be in it in a way that they were not allowed to, and thus the game was disbanded for about a decade. After some legal filings said that the players needed to be paid for their likeness, and then NCAA said, well, you can't pay them for their likeness. Now that they can be, the game is back up. Cole Connor, who I should point out did the hard work here, Houston alum, Cougar Pride ambassador, got shown some of the submissions to EA Sports regarding the upcoming game, and he outlined some of them on Twitter. I want to go through them quickly. So that Houston submitted 3 different football uniforms: the all red, the all white with the red helmet, and then the all blacks with the white helmet with black UH on it. I want to point out that if that's really the full breadth of options sent in, that's not necessarily the whole gamut. Not just missing the blues. Obviously, this was submitted before Houston started pushing forward. They're going to bring out these blue uniforms. We don't necessarily know where they're going to roll out either. But they did go with those 3 uniforms. They submitted a pair of logos, the interlocking UH, the flat one that we've all gotten used to here. And then they have the Houston Cougars, both words in script. They submitted as well. The songs and chants they submitted were Eat 'em Up, the fight song, Womp Womp, Who's House, Houston and Cougars, Spirit of Houston Bell, Shasta does the push-ups. There's a Cougar growl involved. Anyway, a lot of specific things about Houston sent in. And frankly, there's part of me let's just be grateful that they're doing some personalized bits. When you play with Houston, score a touchdown, you hear the growl, right? Those kinds of things can be hearing Womp Womp through this TV screen. While I haven't played a lot of video games in a whole lot of time. Doing a lot more watching of sports than playing video games of it these days. Trying to catch up on tape. Anyway, the idea here, I think, is good. I asked on Twitter, asked on social media what you thought was missing. I think the biggest thing that is missing here is the lack of a throwback uniform option. I thought it was pretty special in the 2020, what was that, 2021 season, when Houston made a run at potentially winning the American Athletic Conference and broke out the old school uniform, old school white uniforms. It doesn't have to be necessarily that version, but some throwback uniform, I think, in the same kind of vein, can drum up some excitement while you're playing a video game, right? Add options to it, even if you didn't know the blue was coming. I also think if they really just stuck with the red helmets and the black and white helmets, having some of the other helmet options like the script or the white or the whatever, like, might have been interesting to keep mixing it up. I can't believe there's no Cougar walk. I don't mean that to say that it's a big part of, everyone has to or whatever. It feels like simple B-roll for them to pre-do, and then for whoever is like your star player in your dynasty mode or whatever, they can just kind of put his face in the B-roll, and it's very easy to automate. I wouldn't have thought that was crazy difficult to do, but apparently they didn't submit that. So I asked this question on social media. Someone on Twitter responded back that they need to get Big Hawk in the game. I wonder if there's a way to get Big Hawk in the game in the same way they have players in the game to get a small NIL cut, because I could see how, as a very recognizable figure, he probably needs some sort of recognition for his name, image, and likeness. I want to give credit on this one. Dave Polo on Facebook said that not having even the mock-up of the new football facility is probably a big miss, considering that, people might buy NCAA 25 and not buy another college football game for a couple of years, because that's kind of how most of us did video games growing up, right? Can't buy a new copy every single year. That's a lot of cash. Not even being able to send in the ops building is probably clever. I wonder if there was something legal about like not being able to submit something that's not completed yet, right? But I thought that was well put by David on Facebook. Other things people have pointed out, Cole himself said the Frontiersman. I wonder if people want Frontiersman in their video game. They might. What do you know? They might. Anyway, the game comes out this July, I believe, and so we're looking at a lot more excitement as we get to it, kind of in the doldrums of summer, but right before football season starts. Should be an exciting time to get people excited about Houston Cougar football. A lot of fun stuff going on around the programs right now, and so I gotta say, it's a good time to be a Houston Cougar fan. Good time to be listening to Locked On Cougs each and every morning. We appreciate you doing it. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Again, my name is Parker Ainsworth. At all your social media handles at Painsworth512 to talk about what's going on with the Cougs, the Blue, or frankly, video games, or anything else going on in Houston sports these days. That's at Painsworth512, Painsworth 512 on Twitter, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, any social media account. That's where you find me. Again, Locked On Cougs is proud member of the Locked On Podcast. I mean, it's your team every day. Go Cougs.